Hey everyone, I've been enjoying Let's Go Eevee for the last week. Nothing like a video game title that has proper punctuation. Other than that, there's lots of interesting things to talk about with this game, as well as its companion game, Let's Go Pikachu. From what I found from a bit of Googling, it seems that Pokemon Let's Go is the name people give this pair of games, so I'll sometimes refer to them as such. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee are remakes of Pokemon Yellow. Many people consider these games core games or mainline titles, but I'm not so sure if I agree with that. These are all just fan-made terms in the end. For me, it's a sort of half spin-off, half mainline game situation, mainly because of its ties to Pokemon Go and the fact that many features of modern mainline games aren't present at all. Anyway, that really doesn't matter too much. Let's go and take a look at it. Depending which version you get, you'll either have Eevee or Pikachu as your main Pokemon. Pikachu or Eevee will be the opposite gender of your character. Female Pikachus have the regular heart-shaped tail like in the modern Pokemon games, whereas female Eevees have a more subtle heart-like fur pattern on the tail. The gameplay is a mixture between simpler Gen 1 era mechanics, Pokemon Go, as well as a bunch of new features as well. The very first thing many people will notice is how prevalent Pokemon are outside of the usual battle screens and menus, as well as the catching procedure. I'm a big fan of how Pokemon now populate the overworld. My biggest problem with Pokemon over the decades was that you never really saw Pokemon in the world, except on some very few occasions. There was this sort of divide that kept the overworld and Pokemon apart, but not here. In Pokemon Let's Go, you see them running around and in full size as well. I'll admit, it's pretty funny to see an Onix just pop out of nowhere though. But overall, this is a good thing, and it also makes it nicer to navigate through the world. It's much easier to run around and avoid wild Pokemon if you don't really want to deal with them at the moment. I prefer that to random encounters. Catching Pokemon is very much aligned to how things work with Pokemon Go. You lob your balls at the Pokemon without fighting them, except for a few special occasions. The smaller the circle, the better the throw is if you get it through. This is probably a good time to talk about controls here. There's a few different ways of going about it, but the standard method, if you're docked or in tabletop mode, is using one of the Joy-Con. Doesn't really matter if it's the left or the right one, whichever you prefer. The analog stick is always for moving, and the buttons are always for the face buttons. I'm left-handed, so I just use the left Joy-Con. Throwing Pokeballs is done by making a motion that I wouldn't exactly consider a throwing motion, but I guess they want to discourage Wii-like incidents. It works really well at first, but I'm not a fan of these controls. I like using directional buttons in menus because that's just a quicker way to navigate, but of course you can't here. The not quite D-pad acts like the A, B, X, Y buttons in this instance. Also, in a regular controller, you have one thumb dedicated to moving your character, and your right thumb is ready to manipulate the face buttons. But here, there's a small gap between moving your thumb from the analog stick to the buttons. And you have to do it all the time. It just gets on my nerves. Also, moving my thumb like this all the time isn't all that comfortable for me because the Joy-Con isn't shaped ergonomically for me because of how flat it is. That's the sort of movement which makes my wrist and hand hurt. In normal circumstances, I have to alternate between my left and right hand when using a mouse, and I find myself doing the same thing here, except much more frequently. So if you got the same sort of issues like me, be warned. Handheld controls work very traditionally, and you aim your Pokeball by moving the system around. Throwing is done with the A button. It's too bad you can't use this sort of control scheme when docked. You can use a Pro Controller, which I unfortunately don't have yet. You can also use the Pokeball Plus, but for me the novelty wore off pretty quick. The A button is the analog stick. The worst thing about the controllers is the whole clicking on the analog sticks thing, and this Pokeball controller makes that nightmare its main feature. If that wasn't enough, a button you use less, the X button is located at the top and is much easier and nicer to use. The Y button is accessed through shaking, and there's no B button. It does have other uses, but I didn't think it was worth it to me. That being said, I'm sure a lot of people would like using the Pokeball. It makes sounds and it lights up, and it's kind of fun to use in a way. Plus you can bring Pokemon around with you, like the Pokewalker, and there's also additional Pokemon Go features that you can take advantage of. Since I don't own one, I can't really go into detail about it though. The point of using one Joy-Con, of course, was to have the whole throwing thing be part of the gameplay, but it also allows really easy co-op multiplayer. Give someone else the other Joy-Con and play some Pokemon together with a friend. All the other player needs to do is turn on the Joy-Con if it wasn't before, and give it a quick shake. The supporting trainer will show up on screen and be able to help you. The supporting trainer will always be the opposite gender of the main player, and they'll also share exactly the same outfit as well. The second player can't interact with the environment, so no picking up items, entering buildings, or initiating battles. The only functions they can do is help with catching and fighting. When trying to catch Pokemon together, you're going to consume more balls, but the chances of catching a Pokemon are higher, I'm guessing. It appears like that anyways. You also get a sync bonus when hitting the Pokemon at the same time, which translates to more experience points. The battles are kind of funny because even though the second player gets the second Pokemon in line, you're still ganging up against your opponent. You get 2 moves in 1 turn. I was the second player on my friend's game, and it was a good time overall though. He was a bit too low level for some of the opponents he was supposed to face, but he managed at the end with my help. It's also a good way to level up lesser used Pokemon while reducing the risk of them being one-hit KO'd. XP is shared between the party like it is with Gen 6 and 7 games, just so you know. Of course, Pokemon used in battle just get more XP, which is why this mode is useful. You can actually play co-op with yourself, which feels slightly cheaty, but it's doable, and like I said, leveling up your party is a bit easier this way. And shaking the controller again makes the second player go away. Let's take a look at the game's appearance and presentation. I think the Pokemon Let's Go games look pretty good. You can tell that the grid-like layout has 2D origins. That being said, the Kanto region is very nicely interpreted, and in fact, it's the first time we've seen it since Gen 4 games. I think the Pokemon all look great, as do the environments, but as you can see, there are some low-resolution textures here and there, as you can see on this Arcanine. I also think this game looks a bit too cheerful. Not that I have anything against cheerfulness, but everything looks like this. As in, there's not that much variety. As an example, Lavender Town and the inside of Pokemon Tower could have looked much cooler if it didn't have such a cartoony vibe. How about some darker colors? Perhaps some moodier fog that obscures things a bit more? The trees also could have looked different around the town. But unfortunately, that's not the case. In a way, this makes Pokemon Let's Go look a little bit flat. After an hour of playing, I'm already used to the colorful look and would have liked to see some extra shading here and there. Characters look great though. Other trainers seem much more alive with their reactions and details. The music sounds great, but I wish that Lavender Town theme was a bit more jarring like the original Game Boy version. It's a bit more subdued sounding here, but I do like the Pokemon Tower music. In fact, I pretty much like almost all the music everywhere in the game. It's just straight up Pokemon. No messing about trying to put a spin on things just to stand out from other Pokemon games. It's just very beautifully renditioned versions of classic songs. This may be a bit odd, but I do have a complaint about the footsteps. You can hear the character running when you start running, but it fades out really quickly until you can't hear it anymore. Why did they do that? The story somewhat parallels Pokemon Yellow, but it's made clear that this game takes place after the Gen 1 games because you meet Gary/Blue early on. I don't think that's a spoiler. I kind of like that for the same reasons I liked Black and White and Black and White 2. Nostalgia is often the result of things not being quite the same as they once were. So by outright telling the player that you're not playing the exact same game, you get a bit of a nostalgic vibe going. You start wondering what sort of things happened during your absence, a bit like in real life when you start thinking about your old hometown you haven't been to in 18 years, or what your old high school is like now. There's this re-exploration aspect which adds to the game if you've played the original Gen 1 games or even any of the remakes. There is a new rival, and despite his aggressive eyes, he's pretty friendly. I actually prefer rivals who are a bit more unlikable or unfriendly at first. Something like that would serve as a good way to show character development, where the rival and main character eventually learn that competition doesn't have to be hostile and can indeed be friendly and an overall positive experience. Let's talk about some other features. There's no HMs, just like in Gen 7 games, so that's great. As you progress through the game, your Pikachu/Eevee will learn all the HM equivalents as needed. You can also dress your partner and your player character in various costumes that you get as you play and talk to people. As you become better friends with your partner Pokemon, they'll avoid more attacks. You can pet and play with them, and a detail I liked was when my Eevee was scared being inside Pokemon Tower. There are many noteworthy things missing from Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu though. No day or night cycles, no breeding, no eggs or item holding. It's also just Gen 1 Pokemon, but you do get Alola versions, which you can either get from trades with NPCs or from Pokemon Go. GTS-style online trading isn't a thing here, which is kind of disappointing. I like collecting Pokemon, so Gen 1 plus Meltan and Alola variants aren't too exciting for me. I really want more. There's also a bunch of moves missing in this game, and things like abilities aren't utilized either. The Bulbapedia has a pretty comprehensive list going on, so you might want to check that out for more details. Let's talk about Pokemon Go integration now. In Fuchsia City, is that pronounced correctly? I once said it incorrectly in an older video and got heat for that. But anyway, there you'll find Go Park, which is where you can transfer Pokemon from Pokemon Go into the game. This is restricted to Gen 1 Pokemon, as well as Alola forms of those, and Meltan. It's a one-way process, by the way, so no transferring back. But yeah, those were the things I thought were noteworthy of Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu. Overall, very fun games for me, but I'm not surprised to hear people disliking the lack of common features. I'm not happy that they aren't there either, but that's something I knew would be the case. The price can seem a bit much for what you get, but the unique experience can be worth it for a lot of people. For example, there are people my age who haven't played a Pokemon game since the Gen 1 days who will probably love this game. For me, I'm fairly experienced with Pokemon games, yet I liked it because the process of playing through it is just enjoyable to me despite my various complaints. Anyway, let me know what you think of Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu. Remember to like the video if you did. Believe it or not, even a simple action as that helps out the channel because it lets YouTube know that you had a good time watching the video. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I make videos about all sorts of video game stuff, so there might be a few things here and there that you'll enjoy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.